It started like any ordinary morning on Route 17. The highway stretched endless and quiet under the soft glow of dawn, fields of gold on either side. Mist rising gently over distant hills, and on that road, rattling along at a slow, deliberate pace, was an old beat-up Chevy truck, faded blue paint clinging to rusted metal, a truck that had seen better days. Much like the man behind the wheel, he was alone, silent, eyes focused but distant, a heavy beard, worn hands clutching the steering wheel. Like it was the last solid thing left in his world. The old man's name was Thomas Grayson, a name that wouldn't ring bells in most places. Just another forgotten soul in a forgotten corner of America. But Thomas carried something inside him, something that time couldn't rust and life couldn't take away as he drove that morning. The radio played a soft country song barely audible over the creaks of the old engine. In the distance, flashing red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. A police cruiser gaining fast. Thomas didn't speed, didn't swerve, he simply eased. The truck onto the shoulder came to a gentle stop, engine idling low. The officer stepped out, young nervous hand resting on his sidearm, out of habit more than threat. He approached the truck cautiously. "Scanning for signs of danger, license and registration, sir," came the polite but firm voice of Officer Daniels. Thomas moved slowly, deliberately, reached into the glove box with weathered hands that shook, not from fear but from time, as he moved. The morning light caught something on his dashboard, a gleam of gold, a small metal resting just above the cracked steering wheel, faded ribbon, scratched metal, but unmistakable in its meaning. The officer froze, his breath caught without warning, his eyes locked not on the old man, but on that metal, a metal of honor. Silence stretched between them, the weight of history and sacrifice filling the space where words didn't dare. Thomas met his eyes for the first time, a calm, steady gaze that had seen more than most could imagine, and in that moment, the young officer knew this was no ordinary traffic stop. This was something different, something sacred. But he didn't speak, not yet, because stories like this one don't rush, they unfold. One heartbeat, one memory, one revelation at a time, and the story of Thomas Grayson, the man behind the wheel of that battered truck, was just beginning to reveal itself. For a moment neither of them moved, the young officer standing still by the driver's window, the old man sitting quiet behind the wheel. The only sound was the soft purr of the truck's tired engine and the distant call of a morning bird across the open fields. Thomas shifted slightly, his hand resting not on the metal, but near it, as if even touching it would awaken something too deep to bear. Officer Daniels cleared his throat. "Sir, do you have your license and registration?" Thomas nodded slowly. Yes, I do." His voice was gravel-worn but gentle. He retrieved the worn leather wallet from his coat pocket, his fingers brushing the metal by accident. As he moved, the officer's eyes flickered to it again. Unmistakable, the gold, the blue ribbon edged in white stars. A medal of honor. Daniels swallowed hard. He had never seen one in real life, only in textbooks and military documentaries, only on television when presidents placed them around the necks of the nation's bravest. And yet here it was, on the dash of a man in an old rusted truck in the middle of nowhere. Thomas passed over the license with deliberate care. The officer's hands trembled slightly as he took it. Scanning the name Thomas J. Grayson, born 1945. Daniels blinked. That would make the man, what, late 70s, maybe 80, and here he was driving alone before sunrise like it was nothing more than another day. The officer's mind raced. Something about the name stirred a faint recognition, but it was far away, buried under years of forgotten history. Thomas tilted his head slightly. "Everything all right?" Officer Daniels caught himself. Yes, sir, just routine." But his voice betrayed him. There was reverence there now, something unspoken, but deeply felt. "What's that metal?" Daniels heard himself ask before he could stop at curiosity. "Respect, maybe something more, something aching and unsure." Thomas let out a soft breath, his eyes flickering down to the dash. That's a memory. That's a lifetime ago." Daniels shifted awkwardly. He knew he shouldn't press, knew this wasn't protocol, but something about the man, the quiet, the way the air felt heavier now, were You were you in Vietnam, Sir Thomas gave the smallest nod. I was a long time ago. Longer than most care to remember. The young officer swallowed again. His own father had served in the Gulf. But this was different. This was the stuff of legend. I have never seen one of those before, Daniels admitted softly. It's an honor. Thomas smiled faintly. The kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, the kind that knows what it cost. They give those out to the living sometimes. But they were meant for the dead. Men braver than me didn't come home. Words hung between them, weighty, honest, sharp as broken glass under bare feet. Daniels felt something tighten in his throat. He shifted again, trying to hold on to professionalism. But respect had crept in, and awe, and something close to sorrow. Sir, I stopped you because of a broken taillight. That's all. You're free to go if you'd like. But Thomas didn't start the engine right away, didn't reach for the gear shift. Instead, he looked out across the fields, the morning sun rising, the sky soft pink and gold. Sometimes, he murmured, it's not about where you're going, it's about where you've been. Daniels nodded slowly, though he wasn't sure he understood. Not yet, not fully, but something told him this man, this moment, it wasn't over. The truck sat still, the engine idling low like an old man catching his breath. Officer Daniels lingered, hand resting on his belt, not out of duty but out of something deeper, now a quiet pull he couldn't name. Thomas Grayson looked out across the endless fields, the golden light brushing over the horizon, and for a moment, it was as if time folded in on itself. Young man in uniform and the old man in his truck, two lives separated by decades. Bound by something unspoken. Daniels shifted his weight. Sir, I don't mean to intrude, but would you mind if I asked what happened, if it's all right? Thomas didn't answer right away. His hands rested on the steering wheel, fingers tracing the worn grooves, his eyes distant, as if searching for something just beyond reach. Most folks, he murmured, don't really want to know. They say they do, but they don't. Daniels swallowed hard. I do, sir. If you're willing, I'd like to understand. For the first time, Thomas turned fully, his tired eyes meeting the young officer's, studying him, measuring something unseen. You ever lose somebody, kid? Thomas asked softly. Not a friend, not a pet, but someone who made your world make sense. Daniels felt his throat tighten. His mind flashed to his grandfather, the funeral, the weight of loss that still clung years later. I have, Sir. Thomas gave a small nod. Then you know what it means to carry a weight that doesn't go away. Not ever. The silence stretched, the air thick with memory. It was 60 years ago Thomas began. Vietnam, the kind of heat that sticks to your bones, the kind of fear that changes who you are. Before you even realize it. Daniels leaned slightly closer, listening without a word. The rustle of leaves, the hum of distant engines, all fading into the background. We were pinned down, Thomas said quietly. 6 of us, maybe 7, hard to remember. Mortar fire bullets, smoke thick enough to swallow the sun. He exhaled a breath that seemed to carry decades of sorrow. One of the boys, Parker, he was barely 19. Couldn't even grow a proper beard. He took a round, went down. Didn't cry, didn't scream, just looked at me, eyes wide like a kid who'd seen a ghost. Daniels felt his chest tighten, his hands still unmoving. I carried him, Thomas murmured, all the way back. Didn't think, didn't stop, didn't even notice I'd been hit until later. Just ran until the jungle gave way to our lines. The words came slow, measured, each syllable etched with something deeper than memory. Something carved into the soul. I didn't save him, Thomas whispered. He died. But they gave me this. His eyes flicked to the metal as if it were a stranger. It was never about bravery, never about medals. It was about bringing him home. That's all. Even if it was too late. Daniels blinked, fighting the sting behind his eyes. He swallowed hard. Sir, I'm sorry. Thomas gave the faintest shake of his head. Don't be. That's life. You carry the ones you lose. You carry them in your chest. And sometimes, when the road is quiet and the wind's just right, you could almost hear their voices again. The young officer stood still, the moment sinking deeper than rules, deeper than duty. Thank you for telling me, Daniel said quietly. Thomas nodded, but his eyes had drifted again. Back to the horizon, back to the ghosts only he could see. The road stretched ahead, but neither man moved, because sometimes the past is a grip you can't outrun. The wind stirred gently across the fields, carrying the scent of morning grass and distant rain, but neither man seemed to notice Thomas. Grayson sat in the driver's seat of that tired old truck, eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the present. And Officer Daniel still standing there, hat in his hand now lowered in quiet respect. The road was empty, no cars, no sound but the steady heartbeat of the world turning on unnoticed. Daniels found himself unsure of what to say next. The words felt too small, too fragile. He looked again at the metal on the dash, the worn gold glinting softly in the new light, and something stirred in him he hadn't expected. "Sir," Daniel spoke gently, "if you don't mind me asking, where were you headed this morning?" Thomas blinked. As if pulled back from miles away, his hands tightened faintly on the wheel. The corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile touched by sadness. "Nowhere important," he said softly, "just driving some mornings. I wake up before the sun, and I can't sit still. The house is too quiet, the air too thick, so I get behind the wheel, and I go." Daniels nodded, understanding more than the words said. It wasn't about the destination, it was about motion, about not letting the silence take over. Thomas exhaled a breath that carried the weight of unseen battles. Sometimes, he murmured, the road feels like the only place where the past can't catch you, but it always does eventually, no matter how far you drive. Young officer felt his throat tighten. He thought of his own father, the nights when the man would sit in the dark with a drink in hand, eyes distant, haunted, words never spoken. Daniels glanced at the metal again, and for a moment the question stirred. How had this man survived? What had he seen? What had he lost that left such quiet devastation behind? But he didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he stepped back slightly, gave Thomas the space, the respect. "Sir, your taillight. I'm supposed to give you a warning, but I think this one's on me. Consider it a pass." Thomas smiled faintly, the kind of smile that barely lifts the weight of old sorrow. "Thank you, officer. Much obliged." Daniels hesitated. Then, without really knowing why, he said softly, "If you ever feel like talking again, the station's just a few miles down. We've got coffee and ears." Thomas looked at him, then really looked, and something in his eyes softened, something almost human again, alive beneath the layers of memory. "Maybe," he murmured, "maybe one day." The young officer nodded, stepped back fully, letting the old man be, because sometimes the best thing you can offer is space. The engine of the Chevy coughed softly as Thomas shifted into gear. The truck rolled forward, slow, unhurried, fading back onto the open road. Daniels stood by his cruiser, watching until the truck became a speck on the horizon. Something about it, about the man, stayed with him, clung like morning mist that refused to lift. Deep down he knew this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. Some stories, after all, are too heavy to carry alone. The road stretched out before Thomas Grayson. Mile after quiet mile of worn blacktop and empty sky. The kind of drive where you lose track of time, where the past feels close enough to touch. The old truck rattled softly, its engine humming like an old friend, trying its best to keep going. Thomas's hands rested easy on the wheel, but his mind was far away. Names, faces, laughter that once echoed through the barracks. Gone now, all of them. The metal on his dash glinted in the sunlight, a silent witness to all he carried, all he refused to let go. The road curved gently through open fields, and Thomas found himself humming an old tune under his breath. Something from the radio back in '68. A song he hadn't thought about in years. Up ahead, a gas station came into view. Faded sign, single pump, the kind of place time forgot. Thomas pulled in, the tires crunching softly over gravel. He eased the truck to a stop, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment in the stillness. Young boy, maybe 10, was sweeping near the door. The boy looked up, eyes wide, as he spotted the old truck. Thomas climbed out slowly, his knees stiff, his back sore, but he moved with quiet dignity. "Morning," he offered softly as he passed the boy. The kid smiled nervously. "Morning, sir." Inside the shop, the bell above the door jingled. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, greeted him with a nod. "Coffee's fresh if you'd like some," she offered gently. Thomas smiled. "I would appreciate that." He poured himself a cup, hands steady despite the years, and as he sipped, the woman's eyes drifted to the medal that hung faintly from his neck now, the thin ribbon barely visible above the collar of his flannel shirt. Her breath caught, her eyes softened immediately. "My brother served," she whispered. "Vietnam." Thomas looked up. Something unspoken passed between them. The quiet recognition of shared grief, shared sacrifice. "Did he make it home?" Thomas asked softly. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, he didn't." Thomas exhaled, lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry. He was one of the good ones." Then she smiled faintly through the sorrow. "Yeah, he was." They stood in silence, no words necessary. The kind of silence that says more than sound ever could. After a moment, Thomas reached into his coat, pulled out a small folded dollar, set it gently on the counter. "Keep the change," he murmured. The woman nodded, her eyes glistening just slightly. "Thank you, sir, for everything." Thomas gave her the faintest of smiles, then turned, pushed the door open. The bell jingled again. The wind stirred softly, and as he climbed back into his truck, the boy outside paused his sweeping, looking at him, eyes wide with something close to wonder. Thomas met the boy's gaze, offered the slightest nod, because sometimes even the smallest moments carry weight, carry history. The truck started with a low rumble, and once again Thomas Grayson rolled back onto the open road, carrying his ghosts, carrying his memories, and somewhere deep down carrying the fragile threads of something still human. The road stretched on, long, winding, unforgiving in its quiet. The old Chevy rumbled gently beneath Thomas Grayson's hands, the hum of the engine steady like the beat of an old heart that refused to quit. The sun had risen higher now, casting golden light across endless fields and broken fences, the kind of morning where the air feels softer. But Thomas barely noticed. His thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Names circled in his mind, first names, last names, men who never came back, men who still lived in the narrow spaces between his heartbeats. He shifted in his seat, glanced briefly at the metal on the dash. A soft exhale left his lungs, almost a sigh, almost a prayer. The memory pulled at him, unbidden, unstoppable. It was the fourth day in the jungle, the firefight still fresh in his bones, the smell of gunpowder, the sharp crack of rifles cutting through the air, the weight of Parker's body, the way his blood soaked through Thomas's uniform, hot, sticky, unreal. Thomas shook his head gently, blinking the memory away. But some memories don't leave. Some become etched into the marrow, permanent. Up ahead, a small bridge came into view. Wooden slats weathered by time, a single lane passage over a narrow creek. Thomas slowed the truck, eased it across with care. The boards creaked under the weight, but held firm. Just like him on the other side, a dirt road veered off toward a cluster of trees, and without really thinking, Thomas turned the wheel, guided the truck down the narrow path. The tires crunched softly over gravel and leaves. The air smelled of pine and old earth. And as he drove, the trees parted to reveal a small clearing, a wooden bench, a simple marker Thomas brought the truck to a stop, killed the engine, and sat in the stillness. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't speak, just breath. Then, slowly he stepped out, his boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. The wind stirred the branches overhead. He approached the marker, kneeling slowly, his fingers brushing the weathered stone. The name carved deep: Peter James Wells, 1949 to 1968. Thomas swallowed hard, the weight in his chest pressing tight. "Hello, kid," he whispered. "It's been a while." His voice cracked, the words rough, fragile. "I still see you," he murmured. "I still hear your laugh. I still remember how you talked about your mom's apple pie, how you wanted to be a teacher when you got home." He paused, the wind carrying the scent of damp earth. His eyes glassed over, but no tears fell. The well had run dry long ago. "I'm sorry," Thomas breathed. "I'm so damn sorry." He sat there, the metal still resting against his chest, the memories thick, the silence deep, and for a brief moment, the weight felt lighter, not gone, never gone, but shared somehow, spoken aloud to the only one who would understand. After a time Thomas rose, his knees stiff, his breath slow. He touched the marker one last time, then turned back toward the truck. The road still waited, the day still stretched ahead, but the ghosts, for now, had been given their due. The truck eased back onto the dirt road, the wheels turning steady beneath the old man's hands. Thomas Grayson didn't speak, didn't hum, didn't move beyond the gentle steering. The clearing faded in the rearview mirror, but the weight of it lingered, soft, heavy, settled into his bones like it had always been there. The metal on the dash glinted once in the afternoon light. A flash, a memory, a scar that never quite healed. Thomas's eyes stayed on the horizon, but his heart was still back there, at that simple marker on that quiet patch of earth where Parker's name waited in the stillness. The road stretched forward, a slow curve leading toward a distant town, one of those towns where time slows, where faces stay the same for decades, where the coffee is always hot and the stories are always old. As the first signs of the town appeared, a rusted water tower, a few scattered mailboxes, Thomas felt the familiar ache stir again in his chest. It wasn't just Parker, it was all of them. Every face, every voice, names he hadn't spoken in years, but carried like living ghosts. He pulled into the town square, the truck rolling to a stop near a small diner, the kind with a screen door that squeaked and a chalkboard sign out front advertising fresh pie. Thomas sat for a moment, the engine clicking softly as it cooled. Then he climbed out, straightened his back as best he could, and made his way toward the door inside. The diner was quiet, a couple of regulars sipping coffee, a waitress wiping down the counter with slow, methodical movements. Thomas nodded politely, found a corner booth, lowered himself into the seat with a soft grunt. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, but a warm smile, approached with a pad in hand. "What can I get you, Hunt?" Thomas smiled faintly. "Just coffee, please." "Coming right up." As she poured the coffee, her eyes caught the medal that now rested just slightly visible beneath Thomas's open collar. Her expression softened immediately. Her hands moved slower, gentler. "Were you Army?" she asked softly. Thomas nodded. "Vietnam." The woman's eyes flickered. Her voice dropped. "My dad served. Didn't come home though." Thomas lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry." "Truly." The woman swallowed hard. "Thank you. Thank you for everything." He offered the faintest of smiles, lifted the coffee cup with steady hands, the warmth seeping through his fingers. The diner buzzed softly, the clink of silverware, the low murmur of voices, the quiet rhythm of small-town life. But Thomas sat still, sipping slowly, breathing gently, and for a moment, the weight in his chest felt just a little lighter, because sometimes all it takes is a kind word, a shared glance to remind you that you're still here, still seen. And for men like Thomas Grayson, that was something worth the road ahead. The coffee warmed his hands, the soft clatter of plates, the distant hum of a radio playing an old tune that Thomas barely recognized. He sat quietly in that corner booth, the weight of the morning, the memory of Parker, the flicker of kindness from the waitress, all settling over him like a worn blanket across the diner. A father and young son shared a laugh over pancakes, the boy's laughter light, unburdened, pure, in a way Thomas hadn't heard in years. It stirred something deep, something fragile. The waitress returned, offered a gentle smile as she refilled his cup without asking, her eyes catching once more on the glimpse of the metal, but she didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Thomas gave her the smallest nod, a thank you without words. The door creaked open, and in walked a man Thomas hadn't seen in decades, a broad-shouldered figure with silver hair and a deep scar that ran along his jawline. The man paused, eyes scanning the diner, then landing on Thomas for a long heartbeat. Neither of them moved. Two ghosts staring at each other across the years. Then the man smiled. Soft, sad. "Well, I'll be Thomas Grayson." After all this time, Thomas set his cup down. Slowly, recognition dawning. Slow but certain. "Jack Harper," he murmured. The man approached, sat across from him without asking. The two shook hands, firm but gentle, both sets of fingers marked by time. "Didn't think I'd see you again," Jack said quietly. Figured you were long gone, Thomas smiled faintly. I'm still around for now. Anyway, Jack let out a soft chuckle. Same old Tom, never one for small talk. The years had carved deep lines into both men. But beneath it, the bond remained unspoken, unbreakable. I stop through here every now and then, Jack explained, visiting my daughter. She's up near Cedar Falls. Thomas nodded, the memories stirring again. We used to talk about that, I remember. Jack's eyes darkened slightly, the weight of shared history settling between them. You ever think about them? He asked softly. The boys Thomas exhaled. Every day, every damn day. Jack's jaw tightened, his hand brushing absently at the scar along his face. I still hear them sometimes when it's quiet, when the wind picks up just right. I hear them laughing or calling out or just there. Thomas's throat tightened. I know exactly what you mean. The waitress passed by, her eyes soft as she caught the look between them. She poured more coffee without a word, then moved on, giving them space. Jack leaned back, studied Thomas for a moment. You still carrying it? The metal. Thomas gave the faintest nod. It's not for me. It never was. Jack smiled sadly. No, it wasn't. None of it was. For a long moment they sat. Two old soldiers. Two old friends. The years folding in around them, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas felt something loosen. Something that had been clenched tight for decades. Jack's voice softened. We made it home. They didn't. But we carry them always. Thomas lifted his eyes, met the gaze of the man across from him, and nodded once. Always. Asterisk. The coffee grew cold, but neither man noticed. The weight of memory held them in place, the years falling away as they sat, two figures bound by the kind of history most people will never understand. Thomas Grayson ran a tired hand through his silver hair, the lines in his face deep, but his eyes still sharp. In a quiet way, he looked at Jack Harper, and for a moment, it was like they were 20 again. Worn boots, sweat-soaked uniforms, the crackle of distant gunfire, the faces of boys who never came home. Jack's fingers tapped softly on the side of his cup, rhythmic, careful, like a man keeping time with ghosts. Jack murmured. I used to think if I just kept moving, if I just kept busy, I could outrun it. The memories, the faces. Thomas gave a soft sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. You can't outrun it, he said gently. It's stitched into the skin. Jack nodded. Yeah, I figured that out. Too late. For a moment neither spoke. The sounds of the diner, the clink of silverware, the low hum of the radio, the laughter of the boy near the window faded into the background. They sat in the quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Then Jack's voice dropped, soft, almost unsure. Do you remember Daniels, Sergeant Daniels? Thomas blinked, the name pulling something loose in his memory. A flash of red dirt, the sound of shouted orders, the sight of Daniels diving for cover. A memory sharp as broken glass. Yeah, Thomas said quietly. I remember him. Jack's eyes darkened. I visited his grave last spring, out in Arlington. I'd been meaning to for years. Finally made the trip. Thomas's breath caught, the weight of it settling deep. He was. Thomas began, but the words stuck, caught on old wounds, old regrets. Jack nodded. Yeah, I know, we all carry it. They sipped their coffee, both lost in the same sea of memory. After a moment, Jack set his cup down, his fingers brushing the worn edge of the table. I see them in dreams sometimes. We're all back there, in the heat, in the green. But no one's afraid. We're just laughing. Like it was before everything broke. Thomas felt the sting behind his eyes, but he blinked it away. You're lucky, he murmured. My dreams, they're always the bad ones. Jack's voice softened. Maybe it's the same dream, just a different side of it. The waitress passed again, offered them both another refill, but they waved it off. The coffee wasn't what they needed. Jack leaned back, studied Thomas quietly. I'm glad I saw you today. It's been too long. Thomas nodded. Yeah, it has. Jack's eyes flickered to the metal resting against Thomas's chest. He gave a soft smile, still wearing it. I see. Thomas glanced down, fingers brushing the metal absently. Habit more than thought. It's not for me, he whispered. It's for them. Always was. Jack's voice was barely audible. Always will be. For a moment, the world outside the diner seemed to hold its breath. The clock on the wall ticking steady, the light shifting through the windows. Then Jack pushed back his chair. I should be going. But thank you, Tom, for this. For today Thomas stood as well, their handshake firm but gentle, two old souls, carrying the same. Wait, take care, Jack. You too, Tom. You too. Jack stepped out into the sunlight. The door jingling softly behind him. Thomas stood still for a moment longer, the quiet wrapping around him, the memories thick. Then with slow, careful steps he made his way back to the old Chevy, climbed behind the wheel, and with a soft turn of the key, the truck rumbled back to life. The road waited, and so, with the weight of the past in his chest, Thomas Grayson drove on. The old truck rolled slowly through the quiet town, its wheels humming over the worn asphalt. The wind pressed gently against the windows, carrying the sense of earth, of fresh bread from the bakery, of the kind of small-town life Thomas Grayson had spent years avoiding. But something about today felt different, something about seeing Jack Harper again, hearing the weight in his voice, the memories they both carried. It stirred things Thomas thought he had buried for good. The metal on the dash caught the light once more, a soft golden gleam, not heavy in weight, but heavy in meaning, a symbol of something most would never understand. Thomas's hands gripped the wheel, steady but soft, his eyes scanning the horizon without really seeing it. The faces of the past still danced behind his eyes, unfolding like snapshots, burned into the walls of memory. Sound of distant church bells caught his ear, somewhere beyond the fields. A wedding maybe, or a funeral, life and loss moving forward. Even as some hearts stayed trapped in yesterday, he passed the edge of town, the buildings giving way once again to endless road, to open sky. But as the truck rolled on, Thomas spotted something ahead, a figure standing near a broken-down sedan by the side of the road, a woman, young, her hood raised, smoke drifting faintly from the engine. Thomas eased the truck over, the tires crunching softly to a stop on the shoulder. He sat for a moment, watching, measuring, old instincts never fully gone. Then he pushed open the door, stepped out, boots pressing into the gravel. The woman looked up, relief washing over her face as she saw him approach. Morning, ma'am, Thomas offered softly. Everything all right? The woman smiled faintly, frustration and gratitude mixing in her eyes. Not really, car just quit on me. No signal out here. No one's come by for an hour. Thomas nodded, mind already working. He leaned under the hood, eyes scanning the engine with the quiet precision of a man who'd fixed more trucks than he could count. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, each motion careful but sure. The woman stood beside him, watching. Her eyes caught the glint of the medal around his neck. That's a Medal of Honor, she whispered. Thomas kept his eyes on the engine, didn't look up, didn't pause. Yeah, he murmured softly, it is. The woman swallowed. Her voice dropped. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thomas gave the faintest nod, his fingers adjusting a loose cable. It's not for me, he said quietly. It's for the ones who didn't make it home. The words hung in the air, soft, steady. After another moment, he stepped back. Try it now. The woman climbed into her car, turned the key. The engine coughed, then roared back to life. She laughed, a soft sound of relief. Oh, thank God. Thank you so much. Thomas smiled gently. Just glad to help. She climbed out again, stepped toward him, eyes still lingering on the metal. If you don't mind me asking, what's your name, sir? Thomas paused, then with a quiet breath. Grayson, Thomas Grayson. The woman smiled. Well, Mr. Grayson, you saved my morning, and I guess more than that too. Thomas offered a small smile in return, nodded once, then with slow steps made his way back to the truck. As he climbed in, he saw her standing there, still watching him, eyes soft, respectful. The truck rumbled to life once more, and Thomas pulled back onto the road, the wind through the window, the metal resting gently against his chest, and somewhere, somehow, for the first time in years, weight of it felt lighter. The highway stretched wide again, the old Chevy's wheels turning steady beneath Thomas's hands. The air shifted, warmer now, the afternoon sun leaning low in the sky. Thomas Grayson sat behind the wheel, the road unfolding in soft golden silence. But something in him felt different, subtle, almost unspoken. The chance meeting with the young woman, her kindness, her gratitude. It stirred something deep, something he hadn't let himself feel in too long. The metal glinted. Once more on the dash, its familiar weight steady. But the heaviness around his heart, the tightness in his chest, it had loosened. Just slightly, his mind drifted back, not to the war this time, but to laughter on the front porch of his childhood. Home, to the smell of his mother's cooking, to the sound of his father's voice calling him in from the fields before dinner. A time before uniform, before loss, the hum of the engine brought him back, the road ahead long and open, but for the first time that day, Thomas wasn't thinking about where the road would end. He was just moving, just being. Up ahead, a rusted sign caught his eye. Antique store 1 mile. Without really thinking, without planning, Thomas flicked the turn signal, guided the old truck onto a smaller road that veered off to the left. The tires crunched over gravel again, dust rising behind him, the kind of back road most people never took. And there, just as the sign promised, a tiny weathered shop sat tucked among the trees. Its windows dusty, its porch sagging slightly with age. Thomas parked, shut off the engine, sat for a moment in the stillness. Then, with careful movements, he stepped out, boots meeting soft earth, the wind stirring the leaves overhead. The door creaked. As he pushed it open, a soft bell chimed, and the smell of old wood, faded books, and forgotten things washed over him. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with thick glasses and a slow, easy smile, looked up from behind the counter. Afternoon. The man greeted. "Let me know if you need anything." Thomas gave a polite nod. "Thank you." He drifted through the aisles slowly, his fingers brushing over shelves lined with relics, pocket watches, photographs, faded letters sealed with brittle wax. He paused in front of a wooden case filled with old military pins and patches, his eyes scanning, tracing the history etched into every piece. One item caught his eye, a folded American flag encased in glass. The small plaque beneath it read, "In memory of those who gave all." Thomas's breath caught his hand, resting gently against the case. The shopkeeper's voice came soft from behind him. "That belonged to a young man from this town. Vietnam, didn't come home. His parents donated it here years ago." Thomas nodded, silent, the weight of memory pressing gentle against his ribs. "I served too," he murmured softly. The shopkeeper gave a quiet nod. "I figured. The way you carry yourself." They stood in silence, two strangers, bound by the same thread of history, of long moment. Thomas stepped away, offered a faint smile. "Thank you," he said simply. The shopkeeper smiled back. Anytime Thomas made his way back to the truck, climbed in, the engine roared softly to life as he pulled onto the road again. The sun dipped lower, casting the fields in deep amber light. The metal on the dash, the weight in his heart, and the kindness he'd found in the quiet places along the way, all carried with him as the miles rolled on. The truck hummed steady, the afternoon light softening into gold. Long shadows stretched across the open road, the fields glowing with the last warmth of day. Thomas Grayson drove in silence, the rhythm of the tires against the pavement like a quiet heartbeat, the wind slipping through the cracked window, carrying the scent of grass, of dust, of something almost forgotten. The small antique store faded behind him, but the memory of it stayed, the folded flag, the shopkeeper's gentle words, the way time seemed to stand still in that tiny forgotten place. Thomas's fingers tapped softly on the steering wheel. The metal glinted faintly as the truck curved along the road, and for a moment he let his mind drift. He thought of Parker, of Daniels, of Jack Harper. He thought of the sound of laughter over tin cups of coffee, of the way men clung to stories, to memories, because it was all they had left to keep the darkness from closing in. The road ahead stretched wide and open, but Thomas wasn't in a rush. He hadn't been in a rush for years. Up ahead, a small roadside chapel came into view, weathered wood, white paint peeling, the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked too long. Something in Thomas stirred an old familiar pull. Without really thinking, he slowed the truck, guided it gently onto the gravel drive. The chapel sat empty, the doors slightly ajar, a simple wooden cross resting on the steeple above. Thomas cut the engine, sat for a moment, his hands resting on the wheel, the metal catching the last rays of sunlight. Then slowly, carefully, he climbed out his boots crunching softly beneath him as he made his way toward the chapel steps. The door creaked as he pushed it open. The inside was quiet, dust motes dancing in the shafts of golden light pouring through the old stained glass. There were no people, no music, just the gentle silence of a place built for reflection. Thomas moved to the front pew, lowered himself down slowly, his hands resting against his knees, his eyes tracing the worn wood of the altar. He wasn't a religious man, hadn't been for a long time, but something about this place, the quiet, the stillness, it brought a kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. He reached up, fingers brushing the metal lightly, then let his hands fall away again. "I don't know if you're listening," he murmured softly, voice barely above a whisper. "But if you are, tell them I still think about them. Tell them I haven't forgotten." The words slipped into the stillness, unrushed, unforced. "Tell them," he whispered again. "Tell them I made it home, but part of me stayed with them." Always a breath, long and slow, the kind of breath that lets something go. If only for a moment. The light through the stained glass shifted. The wind stirred softly outside. Thomas sat there, unmoving, breathing, remembering, and for a heartbeat, the weight in his chest felt less sharp, less heavy. He stayed until the sun dipped lower, until the chapel filled with the deep golden hues of approaching dusk. Then quietly, with the same deliberate care he gave to everything now, Thomas Rose stepped back out into the evening light, climbed into the truck once more. The road was still waiting, and so, with the past behind him and the horizon stretched wide, he drove. The sun dipped lower, the sky painted in deep shades of gold and amber. The old truck moved steady down the two-lane road, its engine humming like an old tune Thomas Grayson knew by heart. The wind had cooled. The shadows stretched long across the fields, and Thomas felt that familiar stillness settle over him again. The kind of stillness that makes the heart quieter, the mind softer. His hands rested easy on the wheel, the metal glinting faintly against his chest. Its weight not heavier, not lighter, simply present, as it had been for decades. Up ahead, a small wooden sign caught his eye. Veterans Memorial Park, half-mile. Without a second thought, without needing to weigh the decision, Thomas guided the truck gently toward the turnoff. The tires crunched over gravel once more, the narrow path opening into a quiet clearing. Flags fluttered gently in the soft breeze. Rows of white stones standing in solemn lines beneath the open sky. Thomas eased the truck to a stop, cut the engine, and for a moment he just sat. The air felt different here. Thicker, somehow sacred, in a way that didn't need words. With slow, careful movements, Thomas stepped out, the wind brushing soft across his face, the scent of grass and old earth filling his lungs. Moved toward the rows of markers, his boots soft over the trimmed grass, each stone carved with names, with dates, with stories he would never know but felt in his bones. Paused at one, a name he didn't recognize, but the inscription below it read, "Duty, Honor, Country." Thomas exhaled, his fingers brushing the top of the stone with quiet reverence. "We were all just kids," he murmured, barely old enough to know what we were fighting for. He kept moving, slow, deliberate, past more names, more stories etched in stone. The sun dipped lower still, the sky deepening into soft purples and gentle blues. He reached a small bench near the edge of the field, sat down, hands resting in his lap. For a long time he didn't speak, didn't move, just breathed, letting the wind carry through the trees, letting the silence do what it always did, hold the weight for him. Then softly, almost to himself, he began to speak. "Parker Daniels, Mitch Garcia, I remember all of you, everyone." His voice was steady, barely more than a whisper, but each name felt heavy, sacred. "I made it home," he murmured, "but not all of me. Not all of me ever left that place." He sat there as the wind stirred, as the light shifted, as the flags rippled softly in the breeze. The metal on his chest glinted in the fading light, but he didn't touch it this time. He didn't need to. The memories, the faces, they lived inside him. They always had. And in this quiet, in this sacred place, he found something close to peace. The weight was still there, but for a moment it felt shared, it felt held. Thomas rose slowly, one last glance across the field of names. Then with quiet steps he made his way back to the old truck. The road still stretched ahead, and so with the sky deepening, the headlights cutting softly. Through the dusk, he drove on Asterisk. The truck's headlights carved gentle paths through the gathering. Dusk, the sky above stretched wide, a canvas of soft purple and fading gold. The road rolled on beneath Thomas Grayson's hands, each mile slipping quietly. Behind him, like ripples on still water, the metal shifted faintly with each bump in the road, catching the last threads of light. But Thomas barely noticed now. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere deeper. The visit to the memorial had stirred something. A restlessness, a quiet ache that never fully faded, but also a calm, a strange, unexpected calm. For years he had avoided places like that, avoided the stillness they demanded. But today felt different. Up ahead, the small glow of a gas station appeared. One of those all-night stops, quiet, lonely. Its single overhead light buzzing faintly in the dark. Thomas slowed, eased the truck, and the tires crunching over gravel once more. Stepped out, the air cooler now. The scent of distant pine carried on the breeze. Inside the tiny station, a young clerk, barely old enough to shave, sat behind the counter, nose buried in a paperback novel. He looked up as Thomas entered, offered a polite nod. "Evening, sir." Thomas nodded in return. "Evening." He moved through the narrow aisles slowly, picked up a bottle of water, a pack of crackers, simple things, routine. At the counter, the young clerk rang up the items without much thought, but his eyes caught the metal as Thomas pulled out his worn wallet. The kid's voice softened, his eyes wide. "That's a Medal of Honor, isn't it?" Thomas glanced down, then back up. "Yeah, is." The clerk blinked. I've never seen one. My grandfather served Korea, but he never talks about it. He says some things are better left in the past." Thomas gave the faintest smile, soft, understanding. "Yeah, sometimes that's true." The clerk hesitated, then almost in a whisper, "Thank you, sir, for everything." Thomas nodded. "Thank you, kid. That means more than you know." The clerk smiled faintly, shuffled awkwardly, then handed over the change. As Thomas stepped back out into the night, the wind brushed softly across his face. The sky above now full dark, stars beginning to appear one by one. He climbed back into the truck, set the small bag on the passenger seat, and for a long moment he just sat. His hands rested on the wheel, his eyes on the stars above. The quiet stretched around him, and inside him too. The metal caught the faint glow of the dashboard lights, but he didn't touch it, didn't need to. It was there, it was always there. Not just the metal, not just the ribbon, but the weight, the memory, the names. The truck rumbled softly back to life, the headlights cutting through the dark, and Thomas Grayson, with the road stretching ahead, with the past carried silent in his chest, drove on into the night. Asterisk. The night unfolded around him, vast, endless, the truck's headlights drawing narrow ribbons of light across the dark road, the stars above scattered like whispers across a velvet sky. Thomas Grayson kept his hands steady on the wheel, the hum of the engine low and soft beneath the quiet, the only sound for miles. The towns had fallen away, the lights grown sparse out here. It was just the road, the wind, and the memories. His eyes drifted now and then to the metal resting on the dash, the faint gleam of it under the soft glow of the instrument panel, not heavy in weight, but still always there, always present. His mind wandered not to the war this time, but to the day he first came home. Train station, the scattered applause from strangers, the cold wind on his face as he stepped back onto American soil. No parade, no speeches, just tired footsteps and a heart too full to speak. He remembered the look on his mother's face, the way her hands trembled as she pulled him close, the tears in her eyes when she whispered, "Thank God you're home." But even then, even in that moment, Thomas had felt it, the fracture, the weight, the part of him that hadn't come back at all. The road curved gently through low hills, the moon rising higher, casting silver light over the fields beyond. Up ahead, a small motel came into view, its neon sign flickering weakly in the dark vacancy, glowing in tired red letters. Thomas slowed the truck, pulled into the gravel lot, the tires crunching softly as he eased to a stop. For a moment, he just sat listening to the soft tick of the cooling engine, the metal glinting faintly in the dark, Then with slow, careful movements, he stepped out, the night air cool against his skin, the stars wheeling overhead and endless silence inside. The motel office, a middle-aged man with heavy eyelids and a crossword puzzle looked up as Thomas entered. Evening meter room. Thomas nodded. Just for the night. The man slid a key. Across the counter, cash only, but the coffee's free in the morning. Thomas gave the faintest smile. That's good enough for me. The key was cold in his hand as he stepped back out. The motel stretched in a single line of doors, all dark except for one or two with slivers of soft yellow light spilling from the windows. He found his room, unlocked the door, stepped inside. Air smelled of old carpet dust, but it was clean. Simple. Thomas set his bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on his knees. The silence folded around him again, gentle, unmoving. He reached up, fingers brushing the metal lightly before letting it fall back against his chest. Then, almost without thinking, he whispered softly into the stillness, "I'm still here." The words felt strange, heavy, but true. He lay back slowly, closed his eyes, let the hum of distant crickets fill the room, and for the first time in a long time, he slept. The morning came soft, the first light brushing gently against the edges of the motel window, a pale golden glow that warmed the faded curtains. The quiet hum of the world waking once again. Thomas Grayson opened his eyes slowly, the familiar weight of the metal still resting against his chest. The air smelled of old cotton and fresh dawn, a small comfort in an unfamiliar place. For a moment he lay still, listening, the distant sound of birds, the soft rustle of wind through the trees beyond the parking lot. Then, carefully, deliberately, he rose, stretched the stiffness from his limbs, and splashed cold water over his face in the tiny motel bathroom. Reflection staring back at him was older, thinner eyes carved with the weight of years most men never carry, but behind the lines, behind the tiredness, something steady still remained. After dressing, he gathered his things, folded the few items back into his worn bag, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The sky stretched wide above him, soft shades of pink and gold, the first warmth of sunlight brushing over the horizon. The old truck sat waiting, its familiar shape solid, comforting. Thomas climbed in, ran his hand gently over the wheel. The engine coughed to life on the first try, a low, steady rumble that felt like an old friend whispering, "Welcome back." He pulled onto the road once more, the tires humming over the pavement. The air crisped through the open window, and for the first time in days something in him felt lighter. The road led him toward a small town nestled in the valley ahead, a place he didn't recognize by name, but one that looked like every small town he'd ever known. A diner, a church, children walking with school bags, life moving steady in the morning light. Thomas slowed as he reached the town square, his eyes catching on a small group gathered near the courthouse steps. A folded flag held carefully in the arms of a young soldier in dress blues. Faces somber, hands held over hearts. He eased the truck to a stop. Along the curb, sat in silence, watching. It was a memorial ceremony, one of those quiet tributes that happen all across America. Names read aloud, flags folded, tears brushed away in the early light. Thomas felt the tightness in his throat, the way his hand drifted almost unconsciously to the metal resting beneath his shirt. He watched as the final name was spoken. The small group bowed their heads, and the soft sound of taps carried gently on the wind. For a long moment Thomas didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, slowly, he lowered his head, closed his eyes, a quiet prayer unspoken, but heard. When the ceremony ended, the small crowd began to drift away, quiet voices, soft footsteps on old pavement. Thomas started the engine again, eased the truck back onto the road, but something in his chest, something deep, had shifted. It wasn't about the war, it wasn't about the metal, it was about the lives, the moments, the way one person's memory can echo through the heart of a town, through the heart of a country. The road stretched forward, bathed in morning light, and Thomas Grayson, with the metal still close, with the ghosts walking gently beside him, drove on the road unwound before him, soft curves through rolling hills, the kind of drive that quiets the noise in a man's head, the wind slipping gentle through the open window, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Thomas Grayson drove without hurry, without destination, the old truck steady beneath his hands, the metal resting against his chest, a weight he no longer fought, no longer ran from the ceremony he had witnessed. The folded flag cradled in that young soldier's arms, it stayed with him, pressed close like a whisper he could still hear over the hum of the tires. His mind drifted. Not to the war this time, but to life after the first years back home. The way everything had felt foreign, too bright, too loud. He remembered the factory job he took, the way the machines drowned out his thoughts, the way he learned to move like a man who didn't carry the weight of fallen brothers. But at night alone, the memories always returned, soft at first, then sharp, unforgiving. Truck curved through another bend. A hawk soared overhead, its wings stretched wide, effortless against the endless blue. Thomas's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. The face of Parker came to him again, the way the kid used to grin even when things looked bad, the way he'd carried a photo of his sweetheart tucked into his helmet. A life cut short. A future never lived. The truck rumbled on the sky above, deepening. The day pressing gently forward. Up ahead, a wooden sign marked the entrance to a small county fair. Colorful flags strung between posts, children's laughter rising faintly in the breeze. Thomas almost passed by, almost kept rolling, but something tugged at him, something small, human. He slowed, turned the wheel gently, guided the old Chevy onto the gravel lot. The fare was modest. A few rides, cotton candy stalls, the sound of music drifting soft over the afternoon. Thomas parked, stepped out slowly, his boots crunching over gravel, the air thick with the scent of popcorn and fresh hay. He moved through the fair quietly, a quiet observer. Children ran past, families laughed, life unfolded in soft color around him. No one noticed the metal, no one stared. He was just another face, another passerby at the edge of the fairgrounds. An old carousel turned slowly, painted horses rising and falling in gentle rhythm, the music soft and lilting. Thomas paused, watched the carousel spin, the children's faces lit with joy, the parents standing nearby with tired but content smiles. For a moment, for just a moment, the weight inside him eased, because this was what they had fought for, the laughter, the simple joys, the chance to live without fear. His hand drifted to the metal once more, fingers brushing the cool metal softly. A quiet breath left him, almost a prayer. Then with slow, steady steps, Thomas turned back toward the truck, the sun warm on his face, the sound of laughter fading behind him, but still carried, still held. The road waited, and so he drove on. The sky stretched wider now, the deep blue softening into the golden hush of late afternoon. The truck rolled on, steady, faithful, its engine humming like a heart that refused to give up. Thomas Grayson drove without rush, the carousel's music still faint in his ears, the sound of children's laughter still flickering at the edges of his thoughts. The road bent through farmland. Tall rows of corn swayed in the breeze, the scent of fresh earth and summer wind carrying through the open window. Metal on his chest pressed lightly with every breath. A familiar presence now, not a burden, not a curse, just a part of him. Up ahead, the silhouette of a man came into view, standing by the side of the road, thumb out, a dusty backpack slung over one shoulder. Without thinking, without hesitation, Thomas slowed the truck, easing onto the gravel shoulder with a soft crunch. The young man approached, maybe mid-20s, face sunburnt, eyes tired but grateful. Afternoon, sir, the man offered, voice polite but worn. Didn't think anyone would stop out here. Thomas gave a small nod. Where you headed, son? Anywhere past this stretch, the man shrugged. Name's Aaron. Thomas glanced at the empty passenger seat, then back to the road ahead. Hop in, I'm headed west. Aaron smiled grateful, climbed into the passenger seat. The door creaked softly as he shut it. They drove in easy silence for the first few miles, the wind carrying through, the hum of tires steady. After a while, Aaron spoke softly. Your truck's a beauty, old, but still running strong. Thomas smiled faintly, kind of like me, old, but still moving. Aaron chuckled. Yeah, I hear that. His eyes drifted, caught the glint of the metal, and something in his face shifted, softened. That's a Medal of Honor, he said quietly. Thomas nodded, didn't look away from the road. Yeah, it is. Aaron's voice dropped. I never met anyone who had. One, my grandfather, he served Vietnam too, but he never talked about it much. Thomas exhaled slowly. I know the type. Sometimes the words, they get stuck. Too sharp to say aloud. Aaron nodded. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. The road stretched on long and golden under the falling sun. After a moment, Aaron spoke again. I'm trying to get back home. Been gone a while, did some time overseas myself. Not the same, not as bad. But it messes with your head, you know. Thomas turned, met the young man's eyes briefly. I know I do. They drove without speaking for a stretch, the shared weight between them heavy but unspoken. Each man lost in his own echoes. The truck moved forward, the sun slipping lower. The horizon bathed in gold and soft shadow. Aaron's voice came again, barely above a whisper. I used to wonder why people like you, men who've seen the worst, why you'd still be kind, still be gentle. Thomas's fingers brushed the wheel softly. Because, he murmured, if we don't hold on to kindness, the rest wins, and I won't let it win. Not after everything. Aaron sat in silence, the words settling deep. The truck rolled on. Two men, two generations bound by something older than words, and the road. Always the road stretching on beneath the open sky. The sky burned soft gold as the truck rumbled on. The silence between Thomas Grayson and Aaron stretched easy now. Not awkward, not tense, just the quiet understanding of two men who had seen things most wouldn't believe. Fields gave way to scattered trees, the road narrower, the shadows longer. Aaron shifted in his seat, his hands resting over his knees. His eyes distant, like he was seeing something far away, something only he could see. I thought I could forget, he said quietly. After I got back, I thought if I kept moving, kept busy, the memories would fade, the noise would stop. Thomas kept his eyes on the road, but his voice came soft, measured. That's what we all think at first. Aaron let out a breath, half a laugh, half a sigh. Yeah, it doesn't work. Not really. The metal on Thomas's chest caught the last glow of the sinking sun, a flicker of gold. A thread of memory you never forget, Thomas said gently. You learn to carry it. That's all. The wind stirred through the open window, the scent of grass and distant pine carried on the breeze. Aaron's voice dropped. I lost a friend, best friend since boot camp. One moment we were joking about going home, the next gone. Thomas's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. The weight of those words pressed deep. I know, he murmured. I know exactly what that feels like. They drove in silence again, the road humming beneath the tires, the truck steady, the world soft in the fading light. After a while, Aaron turned, his voice softer still. How did you learn to live with it? The guilt, the memories. Thomas thought for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon, his breath slow. You don't, he said finally. Not really. You carry them. The faces, the names, you carry them with you everywhere. Paused, the wind brushing across his face. But you also carry their laughter, their kindness, the good things, the things worth remembering. Aaron's eyes glistened faintly, but he nodded. I think I needed to hear that. Thomas gave the faintest smile. Me too. The truck curved gently through the last stretch of farmland, the sky now a soft blend of violet and deep blue. Stars beginning to flicker one by one. Up ahead, a small crossroads came into view, a rusted signpost, a gas station with a single flickering light. Aaron shifted. That's me. That's where I turn off. Thomas eased the truck to a stop, the tires crunching softly over gravel. Aaron climbed out slowly, shouldered his pack, then turned back. Thank you, sir, for the ride, for everything. Thomas met his gaze, gave a small nod. You take care, son, and remember, we're all still here. All of us. Aaron's eyes softened. He nodded once, then with a quiet wave, he turned, walked down the side road, his silhouette fading into the dusk. Thomas sat for a moment longer, the engine idling soft beneath his hands. Then, with the slow breath of a man at peace with the way he carried, he pulled back onto the road. Truck hummed steady, the metal resting warm against his chest, and the night stretched wide before him, full of stars, full of memory, full of life still left to live. The night deepened, the last glow of sunlight fading completely behind the hills. The road stretched endless ahead of Thomas Grayson, a narrow ribbon of quiet beneath a puzzle. Sky crowded with stars, the old Chevy moved steady, the engine's hum soft. A lullaby for the restless heart. Thomas kept his hands loose on the wheel, his thoughts gentle now. Not sharp, not painful, just memories like old photographs left out in the sun. The young man, Aaron, the weight in his eyes, the way he clutched his pain like something sacred. It stayed with Thomas because he knew, he had always known, that the past doesn't stay buried. It walks with you, rides beside you, breathes through you. But tonight, for the first time in years, Thomas felt something shift, something small, but real. The road curved gently along the edge of a quiet lake. The water stretched black and endless to his left, the moon casting silver across its still surface. Slowed the truck, eased it onto the gravel, brought it to a stop beside the water's edge. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. The night pressed close. Gentle, unmoving. Thomas stepped out, the air cool against his face, the scent of damp earth and pine surrounding him. He walked slowly to the shoreline, the soft crunch of gravel under his boots. The lake mirrored the stars above, the stillness almost too perfect to believe. He sat on an old log, hands resting on his knees, the metal glinting softly under the moonlight. For a long time he didn't speak, didn't move, just breath. Then, softly, he whispered into the quiet eye, "I'm still here, I'm still carrying youth." Words were barely sound, but they filled the air around him. Parker Daniels, the faces, the laughter, the stories, they lived because he remembered, because he carried them. Thomas lifted his eyes. The sky stretched infinite above, the stars burning quiet and steady, and for the first time he let the tears come. Not sharp, not broken, just soft, steady, the kind of tears that wash the edges, that make room for breath again. When the weight eased, when the night felt still once more, Thomas rose, brushed the dust from his hands, and turned back toward the truck. The road was waiting, always waiting. Climbed in, started the engine. The tires hummed softly over gravel as he pulled back onto the pavement. The metal rested warm against his chest. And the ghosts, the memories, they came with him. But tonight, for the first time, they felt lighter. And the man, the soldier, the heart that had carried too much for too long, drove on beneath the endless stars, still here, still standing, still free. The miles slipped by quietly, the soft hum of the truck's tires the only sound. The night stretched wide around Thomas Grayson, a velvet black sky stitched with stars, the moon casting pale silver over the road ahead. Thomas's hands rested easy on the wheel now, not tense, not hurried, the weight of the metal warm against his chest, a constant, but no longer a chain. His breath moved steady, his heart quiet, the ghosts still with him, but softer somehow, less sharp. Up ahead, a wooden sign came into view, rusting around the edges. It read Scottsville, population 602. Thomas smiled faintly, the kind of smile that barely lifts the corners of the mouth but runs deeper than words. He didn't know this place, had no ties to it, but something in him pulled toward the quiet, the simplicity. The truck rolled slowly down the main street, a row of old brick buildings, shuttered shops, a small gas station still lit, the glow of a diner's neon sign blinking gently in the dark. Thomas eased the truck to a stop, parked along the curb, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. For a moment he just sat, letting the stillness wrap around him. Then, slowly, he stepped out, the air cool against his skin, the town quiet, peaceful in the way only small towns can bat. Diner's bell jingled as he pushed open the door. A handful of faces looked up, regulars, locals, the kind of people who know every face that passes through. The woman behind the counter smiled, offered a polite nod. "Coffee's fresh if you'd like some." Thomas nodded. "Thank you, that sounds just right." He slid onto a stool, rested his hands on the worn countertop. The other patrons returned to their conversations, the low murmur of voices, the soft clatter of dishes, a radio playing an old country song in the corner. The waitress poured the coffee, set it gently in front of him. Her eyes caught the faint glint of the metal resting beneath his collar. She didn't say anything, just offered him a smile touched with something softer, something grateful. Thomas wrapped his fingers around the warm mug, brought it to his lips, let the quiet settle over him. This moment, this tiny forgotten corner of the world, felt like a balm, a soft place to land after too many hard miles. The waitress spoke after a while, her voice gentle. "We don't see many travelers this late. Just passing through." Thomas smiled faintly. "Just passing." Through her eyes flickered again to the metal. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He nodded, didn't need to say more. The coffee warmed his hands. The soft hum of conversation around him felt almost like music, a quiet, unremarkable, perfect moment. Thomas Grayson, the man who had carried so much for so long, let himself simply be right there right then. The road would still be waiting. The memories would still walk with him. But for now there was coffee, there was quiet, there was peace, and that, for the first time in longer than he could remember, was enough. Thomas Grayson sat quietly at the diner counter, the warmth of the coffee seeping into his hands, the soft murmur of small-town life folding gently around him. Weight of the metal against his chest, still present, but no longer sharp, no longer a wound, just a memory, just a thread in the fabric of who he had become. The waitress moved easily through the space, refilling cups, sharing quiet words with the few scattered patrons. Thomas kept his eyes on the window, the dark road outside, the distant hum of a train passing somewhere far beyond sight. The door jingled softly as an older man entered, silver hair, worn jeans, a battered veteran's cap perched carefully on his head. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, a nod exchanged, a quiet recognition that needed no words. The man slid into a booth. The waitress brought him coffee without asking. Thomas smiled faintly. He knew that life, the comfort of routine, the gentle weight of being seen without having to speak. He took another sip of coffee. Bitter warmth, steady grounding. The minutes passed slow, unhurried, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas let the stillness settle fully over him. No rush, no battle to outrun, just the quiet comfort of a small place in the middle of nowhere. A place that held no expectations, no demands. He set the cup down, let his eyes drift to the metal, the soft gleam catching the faint light of the neon sign outside. A woman at the far end of the counter caught sight of it. Her breath hitched, her hands stilled on her napkin. After a moment she rose, crossed the room slowly, her voice soft as she spoke. "My brother served Vietnam. He didn't come home." Thomas lifted his eyes, met hers gently. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Her eyes glistened. "Thank you," she said. "For him, for all of them." Thomas nodded, the words catching somewhere deep in his chest. She returned to her seat. But the air felt different now, softer, full of quiet respect. The truck waited outside. The road still stretched endless ahead, but Thomas felt no need to rush. He finished his coffee, left a few crumpled bills on the counter, and with slow, careful steps, made his way back into the night air. The stars burned bright overhead. The wind brushed soft against his face. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, the hum of it steady beneath him. Once again, the metal shifted with the movement, a gentle weight. But tonight Thomas carried it without pain, without fear. The road rolled on beneath the tires, and with every mile, with every breath, he felt a little more whole, a little more free. The truck moved quiet through the sleeping town, the soft glow of street lamps casting long shadows on the pavement. Thomas Grayson's hands rested easy on the wheel, his breath slow. Even the night stretched before him, vast, endless. But inside something had shifted. The metal on his chest no longer pressed like a burden. It lay gentle, now a memory, a tribute, not an anchor. The miles rolled by, the road unfolding like an old song, familiar, steady, and Thomas let the rhythm of it calm his restless heart. In the distance, the first glow of dawn began to touch the sky, faint streaks of pale blue and soft rose. A new day rising quietly on the horizon. Thomas smiled softly, the kind of smile that comes from deep places, from old stories, from survival. He slowed the truck as he reached another crossroads, a gas station just opening, the first signs of morning life flickering on. He pulled in, the tires crunching gently over gravel, the engine sighing to a stop. The Air smelled clean fresh, the first breath of morning. Thomas stepped out, stretched his back, rolled his shoulders beneath the old jacket inside the station. The clerk, young, tired-eyed but polite, offered a soft nod. "Morning, sir." Thomas nodded in return. Morning. He poured himself a cup of black coffee, the same way he had done in places like this, all across the country. A ritual, a comfort. The clerk's eyes caught on the medal resting there, quiet but unmistakable. His voice dropped. I don't mean to be forward, sir, but that medal, that's real, isn't it?" Thomas met his eyes softly. "Yeah, it's real." The young man swallowed. "My uncle, he served Desert Storm. Didn't talk about it much, but I always looked up to him." Thomas smiled gently. "Men like him, they're the real ones. I'm just one of the ones who came back." The clerk nodded. "Thank you, sir, for everything." Thomas gave a soft wave. "No need. Just be good to the people you love. That's all that matters." He paid for the coffee, stepped back out into the morning air, the sky now blushing with the first light of sunrise. He climbed into the truck, sat for a moment, the warmth of the cup in his hands, the soft weight of the metal resting quiet against his heart. The road was still there, always waiting, but today it felt different. Not something to escape on, but something to move forward on. With the soft turn of the key, the truck rumbled back to life. The wheels hummed gentle over the pavement, and Thomas Grayson, with the morning breaking open before him, with the past carried but no longer chasing, drove on. The morning stretched wide and soft, the first golden threads of sunlight spilling over the hills, bathing the road in a warmth Thomas Grayson hadn't felt in years. The old truck moved steady, the tires humming a quiet tune beneath him, the wind through the open window brushing soft against his face. Each mile felt lighter now, the weight of memory still present, but no longer pressing so deep, no longer choking the breath from his lungs. The metal on his chest glinted in the soft glow, a quiet companion, not just a symbol of the past, but a reminder of the life that still remained ahead. Up ahead, a small roadside chapel came into view, white walls, simple steeple, the kind of place where strangers stop, where hearts rest for a moment before carrying on. Thomas felt the pull again, gentle, familiar, without thought. He guided the truck off the road, eased it to a stop beneath the shade of an old oak tree. The engine clicked softly as it cooled, the morning air filled with the scent of fresh grass, wildflowers blooming in soft clusters along the path. Thomas stepped out, boots pressing gentle into the earth, his hands resting for a moment on the worn door before he turned, walked slowly toward the chapel steps. The door creaked as he pushed it open. The stillness inside wrapped around him, soft, sacred, the kind of silence that holds stories, whispers of prayers left behind. He moved to the front pew, lowered himself down slowly, hands resting on his knees. For a long moment he didn't speak, just sat, breathed, let the quiet fill him. Then, softly, almost to himself, he whispered, "I'm still here." The words were simple, but they felt true, real. He let the memories come, not with fear, not with regret, but with something closer to acceptance. The faces, the voices, the laughter in the jungles of another life. All of it held, honored, not buried. Thomas sat until the sunlight shifted through the stained glass, casting soft color across the wooden floor. Then slowly he rose. At the back of the chapel, a small box for written prayers, stood a worn pencil, scraps of paper folded and left by quiet hands. Thomas hesitated. Then, with deliberate care, he took one, wrote a single line in the soft curve of his old handwriting. "Thank you for letting me come home." He folded it, placed it gently into the box, and stepped back into the morning light. The truck waited, the road still calling, but something in Thomas felt lighter now, more whole. He climbed in, started the engine. The wheels turned steady once again beneath him. The metal brushed softly against his heart, and the horizon stretched wide before him. The journey not over, but different now, full of breath, full of space, full of life. Truck rolled steady beneath the morning sun, the sky above wide and endless, the fields bathed in soft golden light. Each breath Thomas Grayson took felt fuller, now easier. The road curved gently, the wind through the window warm and sweet, the metal resting quiet against his chest, no longer a weight to bear, but a reminder, a thread of memory woven deep but soft. Miles slipped by, not in a rush, not in a blur, but in quiet, steady rhythm, each moment its own, each breath its own. Thomas passed small towns, farmhouses with porches draped in flags, old barns standing watch over fields of wheat and corn. People waved now and then, and he found himself lifting a hand in return, a soft smile tracing the lines of his face. The world felt closer, less distant. He pulled over once more, at the crest of a hill overlooking a quiet valley. The truck settled gentle as he cut the engine, the only sound the soft sigh of the wind and the quiet hum of morning birds. Thomas stepped out, stood with hands resting easy in his pockets, eyes on the wide horizon before him. For a long time he just stood there, breathing, watching the wind ripple through the grass like waves on an endless green sea. The faces still lived in him, Parker Daniels, all of them. They would never leave, but they no longer haunted his every breath. They no longer chained him to the past. He could feel them softly, a part of him, but not all of him. Thomas closed his eyes, lifted his face to the sun. The warmth soaked into his skin, and in that stillness, in that quiet moment beneath the endless sky, he let the weight fall away completely. Not forgotten, not erased, but carried differently now. Carried with grace. When he opened his eyes, the world felt brighter, the air tasted sweeter. He turned, climbed back into the truck. The engine rumbled softly to life. The metal shifted gently as he settled into the seat, and as the tires met the road once more, as the horizon stretched wide and welcoming, Thomas Grayson drove on, not to outrun the past, not to chase what had been lost, but simply to keep living, to keep breathing, to keep moving forward 1 mile at a time. And somewhere in the wind, in the sunlight, in the quiet hum of the world turning, the names he carried, the faces he loved, they moved with him still, but not as ghosts, as light as memory, as the reason that even the most tired heart can find its way home.